Okay, it's time for us to get started this evening. We're going to be in Exodus chapter 2. We're going to be starting around verse 7. Exodus 2, around verse 7. I'm going to do a little bit of summarizing here. So in an effort to streamline some of our participation, I'll be asking questions that are 1 or 2 word answers. And so what I will encourage you to do is just to shout out the answer, which is usually I'm like, hey, stick your hand up. That way our mic runners don't have to go to everybody. But those that have comments, make sure you stick your hand up so our boys back there can see you and we can get the microphone to you. Hopefully that way if in a couple word answers, I can repeat them so the people can hear us. But then our guys don't have to run for a yes or, the tree or something. So we can make this a little more streamlined, hopefully. So we'll see how well that goes. It all depends on how I function. But, okay, Exodus chapter 2. Before we get started, let's have a word of prayer together. Our magnificent and wonderful Yahweh, we are so humbled to be able to call upon you and to talk to you. We know this avenue of prayer is something that we don't use near enough to our own detriment, Lord. You want to hear from us. And that is an amazing thing when we really stop and consider that the King of all the ages, the God of the universe, loves us and is in fact our Father. And despite our sin, hungers for a relationship with us. That ought to humble us. We pray that it will at least help us to be more grateful and to indeed love you more. We ask for your blessings now as we enter into this study. We know that the things that happen in your word are meant for our learning, for our growth and development, that especially with the book of Exodus, a story that most of us have heard many, many times. There is more depth to be gone over. There is more to be mined than just what we think we know. And that if our hearts are open and our minds are open, there'll be more that we can gain from it. Because your word is deep and bottomless. And if we continue to mine it, we will continue to reap the rewards of spiritual wealth. Bless our congregation, bless our shepherds, bless us all as we seek to honor and love you and serve you in this community. Please forgive us when we fail you. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so we were picking up in our study with from the discussion last time about Moses being discovered by Pharaoh's daughter. And so this means that he is being brought into the royal family. Just a couple of things to make note of. Who is watching as Moses is sent down the river? Somebody is watching where that ark that Noah is in. Moses. I'll probably end up saying Abraham and Eli and everybody else. Moses is in this ark floating down the river and somebody's watching. Who's watching? Dave? His sister. That's right, his sister. And so she watches him float and is discovered by the princess of Pharaoh's daughter who is going down with her maidservants to bathe. She opens up the ark and she sees this baby crying and it's at least until a kid has screamed in your face for an hour, a child crying usually elicits an emotional response, and that certainly is what happened. She takes him up and she realizes, what about this baby? What does she instantly realize about his identity? Okay, he's a Jew, he's a Hebrew baby. She realizes that, and you would think that would dissuade her. But I'm very much fascinated by the fact that it did not dissuade her, that she just scooped him up and apparently doesn't say anything to Dad and just goes about doing these things. Here's another instance in this very short story that we've got so far of a woman stepping in and undoing the evils of a circumstance created by a tyrant. And never underestimate, ladies, the power of just having a heart for goodness and for righteousness, what you can do. Saving this little boy, now obviously God is watching over, but he uses the compassion of this woman to situate Moses in a place where he is going to be able to flourish and to become the leader and the savior, the one that God will use to save Israel from Egypt. So don't ever underestimate that. What does sister, who we come to know as Miriam, what does Miriam end up saying to the princess when she finds baby Moses? What does she tell her, basically? Says, go ahead. Oh, sorry, I saw a hand up. She says, I know somebody who can nurse him. I know somebody who has recently had a child and his ability to be a wet nurse. And so she goes and gets mom. And you got to give Miriam a lot of credit. I wonder how old she was, but just this smart little goober goes and gets mom, and then mom gets paid to nurse and raise her own child. And what a remarkable thing. If that's not providence, I don't know what is. But it's a really cool story. And so then Moses grows up in Pharaoh's household. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that he is the son of two worlds right now. Because although he is Pharaoh's grandchild, he's the child of the princess, he's also the child, quite literally, of his biological parents, whereas she is nursing him, and clearly she's training him. So he is being raised as both an Egyptian and a Hebrew, as an Israelite, understanding both of those worlds, which I think anybody, even from a purely secular standpoint, can understand why that would be very valuable to the role that Moses would play later on. But nevertheless, that's the world he grows up in. And so he grows up and he becomes a man, and about the age of 40, we learn from other places, something happens in Moses' life. He comes across an Egyptian beating up and taking advantage of a Hebrew. And so Moses kind of looks one way and looks another, and then goes over and gently offers for them to make peace, right? No, that's not what happens. What does Moses do? He kills the Egyptian and then buries him in the sand and then goes about his business, right? And wakes up the next day and then sees two Hebrews squabbling, comes up and says, guys, come on, don't fight your brothers. And they are so thankful for him doing that they say, who are you? And more importantly, what are you fixing to do? Are you going to kill us like you killed that Egyptian? Moses says, uh-oh, this thing is known. And then it shortly comes to the ears of Pharaoh, and I'm not sure if Moses takes off before Pharaoh hears or if he takes off when Pharaoh hears. But regardless, they're all kind of wrapped up. Pharaoh hears about it, sets out. He wants to kill him. Moses is on the run. And where does Moses flee to? The wilderness of a place called Midian. Now, let's stop and think here for just a minute. Somebody tell me, and maybe this is a microphone thing, I don't know. Somebody tell me a little bit about wilderness. What does a Bible wilderness look like? What is it about? What does it contain? What does it not contain? Let's talk a little bit about what a wilderness ends up being. Okay, Dave's got his hand up. Anybody else gonna want? Okay, got another one. Okay, Dave, you go ahead.
Yeah. The Egyptian wilderness is nothing but sand.
Okay.
Okay. There's no shade, no water, no nothing, and you're constantly walking, and then you have to worry about the scorpions, snakes, and everything else around you. And then it's so hot that, if you don't have enough substance to keep you moist, you're gonna just shrivel up and die. Mm-hmm. And you got to worry about where you're gonna sleep and stuff like that.
Yeah. Was another Bruce? Did you have your hand up? No. Okay. Yeah. I mean, what Dave said is basically the way that I understand it as well. Obviously, very, very dry, very arid, a rocky, lifeless place. And one of the things that it's good for us to understand is that from an ancient Near Eastern perspective, the world in which these events are taking place, the wilderness is the realm of the dead. It is the realm of the deceased spirits. It is the realm where not only things go to die, but things that reside over death also reside. When you look at the language of Genesis 3, when Yahweh curses Satan and tells him that you're going to eat dust, what that phrase literally is saying is you're going to be basically the Lord of the underworld. By casting down to the dirt, the eretz, I think is the Hebrew word, that is a word that can mean earth, and it can also mean the under earth, the underworld. The idea of Satan was being condemned as, you're going to be the Lord of the dead. And who actually wants to be the Lord of the dead? That's the Lord of death itself and nastiness. No living creature wants to have that. And so the idea of the wilderness being the place where things die and where the things that rule over death go, which is one of the reasons why the scapegoat that is given off to Azazel in the laying on of the hands of the goat for Yahweh and the goat for Azazel, that scapegoat being sent off into the wilderness, you send sin back where it comes from. Where does it come from? It comes from the realm of the dead. Where is that? Well, that would be the wilderness in their thinking. That's not something that we typically associate with. We just think about it being a bad place to get stuck, but it's so much more than that. But that's where he runs off to. That's his best bet, is to run off to basically the land of death. And he runs out there, and then he finds himself a job. What kind of job does he pick up? Okay. He finds himself in a position to be of service to some women who are trying to tend the flocks that they have, get them water. And he comes upon a situation where these women are being pushed out by shepherds, other individuals, men specifically. And basically they do all this work, and these guys come along and want to take it for them. Drawing water for herds of sheep and cattle and whatnot would be a tremendous effort. And then to do all that and then have these men come along who were bigger and stronger than these. It says he has 7 daughters. I don't know if all 7 were there, but let's just say for the sake of arguing, all 7 are there. Those 7 women up against just a couple of shepherds would still not be enough. They couldn't withstand that, but Moses is there. And Moses comes along and he intervenes. He fights for these women. And he pushes those guys away and makes sure that they are able to take advantage of the water that's there and the work that they've done. They don't lose out on that. Well, these girls, they go back home, right? And when they come back to their father, Jethro, Reuel, both names are used, he is surprised that they've come back so early. And what do they tell him? Okay, yeah, it says this guy comes and saves us. It should have taken longer, but they got back fast enough because of Moses' work and efforts. And then Jethro says, why didn't you bring him back for grub? You left him. Why didn't you invite him here? And let's show our thanks and our gratitude. And so kind of Dad's saying, what are you thinking? And so they bring Moses in, and then a relationship burgeons from there. Not only does Moses willingly stay with Jethro, but he is given one of his daughters, Zipporah. And so Moses becomes family to this group, this group of nomadic people who are living out in this wilderness, making a life. And Moses is a part of that. One of the things that's also interesting, Jethro, what is he? He's a priest. Okay, he's a priest of Midian. And that's a very interesting thing. So we've got someone here who is in a mediatorial role in some way, shape, or form for his family. Now, I want to remind you that we don't even have, the law has not been given yet, right? We're building up to that. Before the law of Moses was given, how did Yahweh communicate with families? Through the patriarchs, through the dads. So this is very much a situation where it would seem to be hinting to us that Jethro is in a role like that, where he is, as the patriarch of the family, that seems to be the role that he has, that he is also the one with whom God communicates. We're not told a whole lot beyond that. He gives some good advice and counsel to Moses as things go along, but it's just one of those things that I want you to think of Jethro more like an Abraham, an Isaac, or a Jacob. A patriarch who is, as the head of that family, is the one getting information and communication from God. And so he's no slouch. He's an important figure. And so as Moses finds himself in a place where he now has he makes himself a new family, basically, and settles into that role, ends up having a child with his wife. His name's Gershom. It says, I've been a stranger in a foreign land. So it's very much on his mind as to where he's come from and where he's at this current state. But a lot has happened in just these few verses. We've gone from a baby to a 40-year-old man who goes running off in the wilderness. And then we're going to have this very short period of time, because we're about to jump into chapter 3, which we're going to read together. And that's going to be another 40 years where this is the life Moses is in. Now, just as a kind of a side note, there was a video that Maverick and I were watching for talking about the book of Exodus. And one of the things that they brought up in this discussion was, if Yahweh was going to intervene, as he is, why did he wait to use Moses? Moses is there in that circumstance. He hasn't left Egypt. He's not been on the run yet. Why didn't God just use him then and there? And I kind of want to open that up for just a minute and see what you think. Why might God have waited instead of using Moses 40 years down the road, like he will? Why didn't he just use him then and there? He seemed to be in a good position, right? He's in Pharaoh's household. Certainly you would think a grandson would have some sort of audience with Pharaoh. Why do you think that is, Jerry?
Well, I don't think that the Jews accepted him as being able to do it, being on their side. Obviously, he kills this Egyptian, and then they turn on him. Mm-hmm. And so they weren't ready for him to be in a position of a leader to them.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. I really hadn't thought about their reaction to him after he killed that Egyptian was not one of gratitude, but it was one of fear and more contempt. Like, who do you think you are? That's a good point. What else? Anybody else got an idea or a thought? It's not that there's a standard right answer somewhere. Robin?
Going along with what Mr. Jerry said, there is an element to which the fullness of time has to come for these people. God has prophesied they'll be in slavery in Egypt for 430 years. They eventually get to a point where they cry out and they're groaning because of this. And Moses, though he was there, it wasn't his time. It wasn't his time yet. And he's a foreshadowing of Christ. And so you see how Jesus came on the scene. He understood by 12 years old, at least, we don't know if it was earlier, that his mission, he knew what his mission was. Moses apparently knew too. We could get that from Hebrews and from Acts, that he apparently knew that he was supposed to deliver the people. But then there's this time period, and God actually trains Moses when he's out in the wilderness. He's teaching him how to be a shepherd, which trains him to take care of these people. But it just seems like there's some parallels there between him and Jesus.
Yeah, there's two things that you mentioned there that are important. First of all, you mentioned the fullness of time. If you recall, when God was making these promises to Abraham, one of the things he said was, the iniquity of the Amorite is not yet full. And we might read over that and just think whatever, but the land that would be given to Israel was filled with people. those people were destined, even Yahweh tells Abraham this, 400 and some odd years before, that eventually their cups, when it's time for me to bring these people out of slavery, it will be because, and also at least in conjunction with the fact that these nations, the 7 nations that are mentioned here, are kind of, the Amorites are kind of, would seem to be kind of a microcosm of all those nations. It's time for them to die. Their wickedness will have come to a point where Yahweh says it's time for them to be destroyed. And so there's something to be said there that there's a time in which that will take place. And my belief is that the 40 years earlier wasn't yet time. That's a whole generation when you think about it. There's still one more generation before the Amorites need to be destroyed. But also, and this was kind of the point that the video was making that we were watching, is that Moses isn't ready yet. Moses has still very much got a lot to learn. I mean, if he's 40 years old, that's 2 years younger than I am. I've got a lot to learn in my life. And the closest thing I can think about is wanting to become an elder one day, and it's like, I'm not even close. It's so much that I still need to learn and so much to grow in, that what difference 40 years will make, 40 years of learning what God expects, on-the-job training, that God knows what we need. He knows what Israel needs. He knows what Moses needs. And also the fact that this is going to involve other nations too. That Yahweh is, none of this happens in a vacuum, I guess is what I'm saying. Jeremy?
Yeah, I think the idea of Moses not being ready is absolutely true. Even evidenced by the fact that he's still called an Egyptian. That's how they identify him. He seems Egyptian-like, language, clothing, appearance, maybe his haircut, I don't know. But it's going to take 40 years to figure out, I'm a Hebrew. And yes, he knew already, and he was willing to step up at a certain way in a certain time, but he needed to do it in God's way, in God's time, as a Hebrew, serving the true God.
Yeah, Maverick?
It takes, there's not many Moseses come around either, and we see that throughout the Bible. It takes certain men of certain character and certain women of certain character in order to step up and stand up for what's right. And so I'm not saying it necessarily took all 400 and some years for that to happen, but it seems as though the right guy came around finally, that God could say, all right, here we go. Now is time. And obviously he knew that ahead of time what was going to happen, but there's 3 things here just in these few verses that Moses does to show that he is ready to fight and ready to lead, and just needs a little bit more time to cook, if you will, in the desert, where the first time he intervenes when a non-Hebrew is oppressing a Hebrew. The second time he intervenes when one Hebrew wrongs another Hebrew, and then now he intervenes again with the women at the well, where non-Hebrew men are oppressing non-Hebrew women. And so any injustice he wants to do something about, whether it is something physical, whether it is something verbal, or whether it's just simply acting and getting rid of those guys so that he can. So he's obviously a man that does not like evil and fights injustice, and that's what was needed in order to get them out, was to be able to take a firm stand against those kind of things.
Yeah, Moses is a doer, and that's something. Let's face it, that's kind of what the Scripture talks about when James mentions, you can go and tell somebody, "I'll be warmed and filled," but then if you're not willing to do something about it, then ultimately what good? Moses could look at his people and look at these women and say, that needs to change, but then do nothing about it. And that ultimately is the difference between, the people who are going to be saved in the end versus those that aren't. The people who look at God and say, I want what you have, and now I'm going to do what it takes, what you've told me to be pleasing to you. I'm going to pursue you in that. And so it's definitely about being a doer. Any other comments before we go on to chapter 3? Okay, so I want to go ahead and read this. I usually read from the New King James, but I have discovered the Lexham English Bible, which is unfortunately only online, so I have to read it from my phone. Yes? No.
You skip, so I'm going to make a couple comments on.
Yes.
Are you going to lead into it?
We're going to sum it up in chapter 3.
You're going to lead into it in chapter 3?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Don't worry. Okay.
Be quiet.
Chapter 3, verse 1. And Moses was a shepherd with the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the west of the desert, and he came to the mountain of God, to Horeb. And the angel of Yahweh appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of a bush. And he looked, and there was the bush burning with fire, but the bush was not being consumed. And Moses said, let me turn aside and see this great sight. Why does the bush not burn up? And Yahweh saw that he turned aside to see. And God called to him from the midst of the bush, and he said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. And he said, you must not come near to here. Take off your sandals from off your feet, because the place on which you are standing, it's holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face because he was afraid of looking at God. So we'll stop there for just a minute. So Moses, as we learned from other places, it's been 40 years when this event begins to take place from when Moses first flees. So he's been out shepherding and for 40 years, and he's on this mountain, which is important, Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. We know this mountain by another name. Do you know the other name for Mount Horeb? Mount Sinai. Very good. That's important. And he's out doing his thing, and he notices a burning bush. Now, I've read a number of things that say this is a thorn bush. I'm not sure if that's in fact. It would be fitting if it was. But anyways, what would you expect to find out in the wilderness but thorn bushes, right? Not palm trees, but thorn bushes. But anyways, Moses is out on this mountain, and he sees something burning. Now, there was a Jewish commentator that made the point, and I thought it was really interesting, that if you were a shepherd out in the wilderness, one of the things that would not be strange is to see bushes on fire. And Maverick and I were hypothesizing, just because things are so dry and barren and desolate, that things can happen if you get a flash of lightning on something or whatever. I found that very interesting. So what I have always assumed that the burning bush would be totally unique, a Jewish commentator said, yeah, no, that's what happens. Fires often break out in dry, desolate places on what little foliage is out there. So that isn't apparently all that unusual. What is unusual, well, you tell me, what's unusual about this bush that's on fire? Okay, it didn't burn. Now, in order for that to happen, most wood does not just go up in 5 seconds, especially if it's a bush of any substance. It would take a while for that to burn. So Moses has to notice this bush and has to keep noticing it. He's doing that because he's paying attention. He's watching something, and it's on fire, but he continues to notice it. He's kind of surveying things. And I find that very interesting because people who pay attention are the people that God ends up using. God doesn't use the people that are so self-absorbed in their own worlds and are doing their own thing. It's the people who are paying attention. And here, quite literally, Moses is a guy who's paying attention to this bush that won't burn up. And as he's shepherding, it goes long enough that he has to watch it for a long enough period of time to realize it's not changing. It's not being consumed. To then say, I'm going to go. And you notice, when is it that God actually speaks to Moses? When he immediately notices the fire? No. When does God speak to him? Okay, when he approached the fire. Now that's something that I think we could preach on quite a bit. God is everywhere, and he's omnipresent. But God reveals himself. I'm trying to be careful because I don't want this to sound like it's some crazy holy roller stuff here. But God reveals himself to the people who are watching and paying attention, and the people who pursue him. The people that are willing to come to him and investigate. There's a reason why the scriptures say, taste and see that the Lord is gracious, because we have to go take a bite, proverbially speaking. Moses was coming to take a bite. He was coming to react to something that God was doing. And it wasn't when he first noticed it that then God says, Moses. It's when Moses approached, when Moses came to investigate, when Moses came to look deeper, that God then revealed himself. And of course, that's how God's always been, isn't it? When does God truly reveal himself? But when we seek him out. Jesus says, ask, seek, and knock. But if we're not willing to do those things, God's not going to force himself on us. But if we decide, I'm curious, I would like to know more about God, the Bible, Jesus, it's then that in the investigation of God's word that things become more and more clear. Creation can tell you that there's a God and that he's powerful. But what he wants, that he wants a relationship with you, that there's a plan in place to facilitate that, that's going to come through further investigation, ultimately in his word. So as Moses approaches, God stops him and tells him something. What does he say? He says, don't come any closer. Okay, there's holy ground, so what does he need to do? Take off his sandals. I don't remember if you made this comment or if I read it somewhere or heard it, but when you stop and think about why this is the case, this is a practice still today that many religions practice. When a Muslim goes into a mosque and takes off his shoes, and I guess there are some Buddhists or Hindu that do that as well. It's a common sign of respect. But I want you to stop and think about it. What material would sandals have been made out of? Okay, what is leather and hides? Where do they come from? Dead things. Dead animals. And that's something I'd never thought about before. I can't help but wonder if that's not a part of this. In approaching the presence of God, take off the symbol of sin. Because things didn't start dying till when? Before or after the fall? After. Death did not exist in this world until after the door to sin was opened. And that includes animals, anything. Death simply did not happen for all living things. And so I can't help but wonder that might be a big part of what's going on. And we think, well, it's a sign of respect. Well, why do we think it's a sign of respect? Because it goes back, I think, to this event, this moment where God is letting Moses know, you are coming on holy ground. You're coming to a place, to a picture of living, of the living, where this dead thing is burning, but it's not dying. It's alive with this powerful force. And I can't imagine how much light would be produced by a fire like this, a supernatural fire. But it's a symbol of something that is supernatural, that is otherworldly. And in approaching this, you're not going to approach with that with something that's made out of, on your feet, made out of dead things. Just a thought, but I thought it was a really good thought. Maverick, did you have your hand up about something?
Yeah, but you pretty much said it. It's a return to Eden. It's a removal of death. Yeah, you got it.
Okay. So, what is Moses' well, first of all, God, how does God introduce himself? He says, I am what? Yeah, I am the God of your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Moses' response to that statement is what? He falls down, he's afraid, and he falls down before God. I think it's very telling that Moses, this is his mama at work, his parents. Moses knows who Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are. And it's when, I find it interesting that it's not till that when God says that, that's when he drops and is afraid more than anything. He realizes that knowing the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, knowing that God was with them, he was the God of this nomadic people. Abraham, he calls him out. This God was not just some local family God stuck, because that's how the gods were in this day and age. The gods had their territory. You had the gods of Egypt, you had the gods of Babylon, you had the gods of Assyria and whatever nations existed, and that was their dirt. And if you come into their dirt, their turf, you're going to fight, but they stayed there. But Yahweh was different in that he traveled with the patriarchs. Wherever they went, he was with them. And he was mighty in his activities to bring about, take this barren couple and bring about Isaac, and to provide for them, and to provide for Isaac, and to provide for Jacob, and how God used Jacob's offspring, Joseph, to save most of the known world through those famines. Moses was taught who the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was. And it's then that he falls and prostrates himself and says, well, he doesn't say anything. He's just open now to understanding who he's really dealing with and who he's talking to. Jeremy? Do you have your hand up? Oh, sorry. Bruce does have his hand up.
Two things. I was reading in Joshua this morning, and the same thing happened to Joshua. He was told to take off his sandals, for you're standing on holy ground. The second one is, God didn't say, I was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But he said, I am.
Mm-hmm.
And as we know, Jesus made the point that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are still living.
Yes. God is the God of the living, not of the dead. Okay, let's go ahead and keep reading here in verse 7. I'm running out of time as usual. And Yahweh said, surely I have seen the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry of distress because of their oppressors, for I know their sufferings. And I have come down to deliver them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up from this land to a good land, flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now look, the cry of distress of the Israelites has come to me, and also I see the oppression with which the Egyptians are oppressing them. And now come, and I will send you to Pharaoh, and you must bring my people, the Israelites, out from Egypt. Okay, so very quickly here, I want to make a couple of points. First of all, why is Yahweh appearing to Moses now? What is it that has caught Yahweh's attention? Maverick?
He hears the cries of the Israelites. And that's the point I was going to make back at the end of chapter 2, is that it says that, God remembered his covenant. And I don't know that remember is really the right word there. It's really more that he decided to act, and now it was time to fulfill his covenant. It's not that God forgot.
Right.
He didn't forget about his covenant, and all of a sudden he's like, oh yeah, I forgot about these guys over here. That's not it at all. So I don't like that word remembered there, because I think it kind of gives us a wrong idea.
Sure.
But I just love through this section how much emphasis is placed on God hearing, God listening, God being aware of our troubles and of their troubles, and that he's not just there for his own pleasure. He's not just existing to do whatever he wants. He cares about us, and he loves us, and he's listening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's fully aware of his people. And one of the things I think was really interesting is that language of I have come down in verse 8. There's another time in the book of Genesis when God says something identical, a story in the Old Testament involving Abraham and Lot, where Yahweh says, I'm coming down now to see about the cry that has gone up against Sodom and Gomorrah. And I think it's very interesting that as he is talking about being the deliverer of Israel here, that language should not be lost on us. I have come down. God has condescended. And we think of that word in a negative way, but that word can be good. God condescends from his throne to come down and see his people. He hears their cry, but he's also, as he investigates the cry is against Egypt, just like the cry was going out against Sodom and Gomorrah. God went down to see and investigate Sodom and Gomorrah are bad. As he's coming down and investigating the cry of Israel, he is also investigating a cry against Egypt. And the cry against Egypt is going to result in judgment. We want to connect that language from Sodom and Gomorrah and the language here. God's doing the same thing, and that's kind of the image of the day of Yahweh in all of the Bible. You got two groups of people. You've got the oppressed and you've got the oppressor. God vindicates the oppressed, and he whips and punishes the oppressor. And that's exactly what's happening here. And as Maverick said, he is completely and totally invested in his people, and he loves them and he sees them, but he also sees why they are crying out, and he will judge the oppressor there. And that's so, so important. I'm going to have to skip a couple of hands here real quick just for time's sake. When we look at him talking about the stress of the Israelites that's come up, and then he says, I'm going to send you to Pharaoh, and you're going to bring my people out. So then in verse 11, but Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring the Israelites out from Egypt? And he says, because I am with you, and this will be the sign for you that I myself have sent you. When you bring the people from Egypt, you will serve God on this mountain. But Moses said to God, look, if I go to the Israelites and I say to them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, and they say to me, well, what is his name? What shall I say to them? And God said to Moses, I am that I am. And he said, so you must say to the Israelites, I am sent me to you. Okay, so an important part of this is, well, why do who am I? What am I supposed to do? And I find it very powerful that when Moses asked the question, who am I? God's answer is not, oh, you're all this and you're mighty and you're good. He says, I am with you. It's not about who you are, it's about who he is. And that's a powerful lesson that Moses is going to learn. Well, as Moses continues to kind of struggle and negotiate a little bit, he says, well, what am I going to tell him? The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Well, what's your name? And then he says something, because English is different than Hebrew, there's just no good way to put this. It's kind of a phrase, I am who I am, or I will be what I will be, or I will be who I will be. It's kind of a tough way, we really don't translate it very well. But from the phrase, I am, or in Hebrew, I guess, is where we get Yahweh from, or Yahweh, depending on how you want to pronounce that, a W or a V. Which is basically him saying, I am. I like to tell people what God's name means in English is, I am the self-existent one. The only thing that exists that has no beginning, middle, or end. The book of Revelation gives us some really good information when speaking of Jesus and all the things going on there, when it talks about him who was and is to come. I think that's kind of the Holy Spirit's commentary in Revelation on trying to understand who Yahweh is and what his name is supposed to be expressive of. How is it that Moses is going to be successful here? The self-existent one will be with you. The only one who has no prior start, who simply is. He will be with you. If all other things exist because of something else, he's the only one that exists without being dependent on someone else. That in and of itself expresses power that is beyond our ability to fathom. I mean, who among us can actually say, I can fathom what it's like to just have never had a beginning? I sure can't. I can't fathom not having an end either. God is all of that in such a powerful way. Picking up in verse 15, God said to Moses, so you must say to the Israelites, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my remembrance from generation to generation. Go, gather the elders of Israel and say to them, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, appeared to me, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I have carefully attended to you and what has been done to you in Egypt. And I said, I will bring you up from the misery of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, to a land flowing with milk and honey. And they will listen to your voice, and you will go to the elders of Israel, to the king of Egypt, and you will say to him, Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. And now let us please go on a journey of 3 days into the desert, and let us sacrifice to Yahweh our God. But I myself know the king of Egypt will not allow you to go unless compelled by a strong hand. And I will stretch out my hand, and I will strike Egypt, and all the wonders that I will do in the midst and afterward, he will release you. And I will give this people favor in the eyes of the Egyptians. And then when you go, you will not go empty-handed. I'll stop there just because he kind of repeats that and all the good stuff they'll be sent off with. But just a quick moment before we wrap things up here. God is appealing to something that Maverick mentioned before, a promise, a covenant. One of the things that we hopefully learn from our Savior, and then it points back to previous stories like this, is that God keeps his promises. When we think of that, we teach our children that, what does the rainbow mean? Well, God keeps his promises. But that is everything to faith. If God is not reliable, what good is your faith? What good does it do to have faith or trust in someone who is not trustworthy? But because he is stating here, I want them to know what I'm doing is because I made these promises, that I would not abandon them, that I would be with them, that I would bring them into this land and give it to them. And I am going to show my power upon the nation of Egypt. And here's the idea of God punishing. Egypt's time, at least as far as this goes, Egypt is due for a royal spanking also. And it's time for them to be judged. All of these things are not happening in a vacuum. Yahweh is guiding his people Israel while he is completely sovereign over Egypt and the Amorites and the Hivites and the Jebusites and all the other ites on planet Earth. He is sovereign of them as well. And this is a special thing that he is reaching down for Israel's sake because they are his people and he will set them up to be successful. Okay, I apologize that we had to go warp speed. I know I had to ignore a couple comments. Forgive me, it's not personal, but I wanted to at least read as much of that as we could because it's so rich and so deep. Jeremy will be with you on Sunday and Wednesday. I will be in VBS in Valpo. So have fun with those next 3 chapters.
Good evening. You will notice that the slides are not working right now. If you could find a songbook near to you and open it up to 622. We'll be singing Higher Ground 622. If there's anybody who does not have a songbook, please raise your hand and we can find you one. And we'll stick with the 22s. We will sing 622 now, and if you would like to mark your songbooks for 822, we will sing God is Calling the Prodigal at the end of the lesson. Mark for 822, and we will sing 622 now, Higher Ground. I'm pressing on the upward way, new heights I'm gaining every day, still praying as I onward bound. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand by faith on heaven's table land, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. My heart has no desire to stay where doubts arise and fears dismay, though some may dwell where these abound. My prayer, my aim is higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand by faith on heaven's tableland, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. I want to live above the world, though Satan's darts at me are hurled, for faith has caught the joyful sound, the song of saints on higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand by faith on heaven's tableland, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. I want to scale the utmost height and catch a gleam of glory bright, but still I'll pray till have not found. Lord, lead me on to higher ground. Lord, lift me up and let me stand by faith on heaven's tableland, a higher plane than I have found. Lord, plant my feet on higher ground.
This week on my mind is name changes and adoptions. The reason being, we are applying for passports as a family. We're going to be going to Canada, see Niagara Falls before the summer is out. And it's a fairly simple process. This is my second time doing it. But it gets a little bit more confusing when you have name changes and adoptions. So Jacqueline had a passport before, but now she's applying under a different name. And so it asks you to report, have you ever gone by any other names? And her name changed when she got married. And I kept it just because it's funny to me, but when Logan first got his insurance card, his name was Baby Boy. His legal name was Baby Boy for 7 months of his life. And so, in case you're interested, it was kind of interesting to me. What do you do when you adopt a baby and you want to get that baby a passport? Well, you got to bring what's called the adoption decree. It is what our judge filled out with the lawyer. It is officially declaring that the biological parents
have relinquished rights, and it declares that in every way, your adopted child is as if he would have been your biological child. And so that I'm going to make a sermon out of this when I have more time to develop it and think about it, because it's cool wording on the document, at least to me. But just the concept that it isn't the blood that matters, it is the relationship as declared by the judge. And it's a cool concept. I know Maverick and Abby will go through that for a little bit. They're going to have a baby with a name, but it's not official in every single way, because it takes a while for the Social Security office to do what they do and all that stuff. But I'll talk about that more later. I just want to read two verses that were on my mind as I thought about this week. In John chapter 1, starting in verse 9, says, "There was the true light, which coming into the world enlightens every man. He was in the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. He came to his own, and those who were his own did not receive him. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God." Jesus came to people who were his family, and his family did not accept him as family. And so his family was a family decreed not by the fact of genetics and blood, but rather by God the judge. And God the judge is the one who declares who has the right to be a child in his family. Usually, I don't think a judge would normally preside over the adoption into their own family, but we have a judge who can do it all. He wears a lot of hats, doesn't he? God is the judge who declares we can be family, and he's also the one that accepts us in as our Heavenly Father. It's a really cool idea. And the whole idea of a name change, I don't know if you ever thought about how many times that is in the Bible. Seriously, so many times there are name changes. You get like Abram and Sarai turn into Abraham and Sarah. Jacob gets his hip put out of socket when he's wrestling, and he turns into Israel. Some of them are negative name changes. Naomi says, "I'm Mara now because I'm bitter." God gives Solomon the name Jedediah because he's a special kid, and he's God's chosen one. Like, there's a lot of name changes in the Bible, right? And you could probably go on and on about them. But usually with a name change comes a change in destiny. And, picking a name is hard, because once you pick the name, that's your kid forever, right? Unless they go legally change it. I remember when Rusty and Kristen Copeland worship with us, they would wait till like the last minute. We picked out a name like super early, but I think one time they said you can't leave the hospital till you figure out a name, and they had to like sort that out, and I remember him saying he doesn't look like a so-and-so, whatever name they had picked out, so they picked the brand new one right on the spot. I might be remembering the story slightly wrong, but it's something like that. But when you name someone that's who they are, right? And there's a concept in Revelation to one of the churches when he says here that he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, to him I'll give some of the hidden manna. I'll give him a white stone and a new name written on the stone, which no one knows but him who receives it. That's the church in Pergamum, by the way. So the concept is when you become a child of God, you're adopted into the family, he gives you a new name, and a new name is a powerful thing. A new name determines your destiny and who you are. This is the family. You're the family of God now. And the world doesn't get it. The world doesn't understand it. But you don't belong to their family anymore. You belong to his family, God's family. So that's what's on my mind. Have you become a child of God? Are you following the Lamb? It's possible. You need to approach him. You need to receive him. You need to accept Jesus, him and his word, for who he is and what he does. And when you do, you receive a change. You will be a new person. Once you have your sins washed away in baptism, you're raised to be a new creature, a new creation with a new name and new life. If you've not done that, or if you got something going on in your life that we need to help you with or to pray with you, come forward and let us help you as we stand and sing.
Prodigal, wandered so far from his presence, come today. Hear his loving voice calling still, calling now for thee, O weary prodigal, come. Calling now for thee, O weary prodigal, come. Patient, loving, and tenderly still the Father pleads. Hear, oh, hear him calling, calling now for thee. Oh, return while the Spirit in mercy intercedes. Hear his loving voice calling still, calling now for thee, O weary prodigal, come. Calling now for thee, O weary prodigal, come. Come, there's bread in the house of the Father, and to spare. Hear, oh, hear him calling, calling now for thee. Lo, the table is spread, and the feast is waiting there. Hear his loving voice calling still, calling now for thee, O weary prodigal, come. Calling now for thee, O weary prodigal, come.
Good evening, everyone. It's really good to be with all of you tonight on this rainy night. Thanks for venturing out tonight. It's been encouraging to be in Bible class together, and I just got to sit with Jasper for the first time, and he sat with me for all of Jeremy's talk, so that was a treat. I want to thank Jeremy for filling in tonight for Eric.